Hello and welcome. It is Friday, and we are going to be writing a retelling of O.Henry's story, The Last Leaf. You'll see on the screen beside me, I have our 7-sentence story framework, and I also have a copy of the story, so we can look at that as we are going through and creating this story. All right. So we're going to dive right in. And when we're writing a 7-sentence story, we have the whole story structure, but we're going to end up with kind of a summary of the story. We're going to hit the main points. So the first thing is, if you have not read this story, I invite you to listen to the last week's episode of Saturday Stories. You can look on iTunes, search it out, Saturday Stories, and you will be able to listen to The Last Leaf by O.Henry. As we go through, this could be your second or third time reading it, and we're going to be able to extract things from the story. So sentence number 1, we want to introduce the characters and the setting. So we need to be somewhat familiar with the story. And if I go over here to the story, characters and setting. So what we're going to do first is we'll jot some notes down, and then we'll see how we can create some sentences from our notes. In a little district west of Washington Square. So that's telling me where we are. So I'm just going to go over here, and I'm just going to actually go like this, copy and paste that over there. So we're a little district west of Washington Square. Who is in this story? Let's keep reading and find out. So we have a bunch of artists, and this is where skimming comes in super handy. If you've read the story before, and now we want to skim it. So to quaint old Greenwich Village. Okay, so we might have this in there too. As we're creating the notes for our 7-sentence story, we're kind of creating an outline. And so all of these things might not go in, but we're going to put in the details that matter. Now here we have Sue and Johnsy. All right, so there we have some of the people that are in here. Johnsy is familiar for Joanna. Okay, that's fine. Do we care that they came? One was from Maine and the other from California? Not really, not when we're writing a super short story. Characters and setting. Okay, this was May. In November, so they came there in May. Do we want to put that? Maybe, maybe not. Let's keep going. We might have to circle back and add some characters later. In fact, I know we will, because there's an important character that shows up later on. But we're going to keep going. This is the beauty of writing, is when you have an outline, you know what details you need. And if you don't catch them the first time, later on, you can come back and add more. So now something happens. In order to have a story, something has to happen. Otherwise, it'd be boring. So in this story, we have in November, and can we see here, it looks sort of distorted on your screen. Hopefully it's not actually distorted on your screen. Let's see here. It was in November, a cold, unseen stranger whom the doctors called pneumonia. All right, so this is the inciting incident. If pneumonia had not come to their area, we wouldn't have a story. So that's how you can determine if you have an inciting incident. Something happens. So I'm going to say pneumonia. Now, this thing that has happened causes the main character. Oh, so we need to know who is the main character. So let's go back and have a look here. We had at the top of a squatty 3-story brick, Sue and Johnsy had their studio. So now who is the main character here? One from Maine, the other from California. They had met, and let's keep going down here. Mr. Pneumonia, talking about pneumonia. Oh, here we go. But Johnsy, he smoked. So we're going to say that I'm going to go back up here, and I am going to make a note that Johnsy is the main character. So what is this thing that happened that causes the main character a big problem? Well, she gets sick, super sick. And we'll say Johnsy got pneumonia. I'd say that causes her a big problem. So she lay there scarcely moving. So she is super sick. So the main character tries to solve the problem but makes it worse. What is that looking like in this story? How can Johnsy make her situation worse? Well, let's see. The doctor says she has a 1 in 10 chance, and that's if she wants to live. Oh, so she wants to die. She figures that's going to solve her problem, and she gets sicker. Perhaps that's making the problem, which was the pneumonia, perhaps that's making it worse. Now, the main character tries solving the problem again and makes it even worse. So let's see what happens. Okay, first, what did she want? She wanted to paint the Bay of Naples. She's lost any drive to do that. Now she's very weak. When the doctor says when the patient begins to count the carriages in her funeral procession, he subtracts 50% from the curative powers of medicine. So she's not helping herself at all. She's planning on dying. But here's where she's got it sorted out. Here we go. She was looking out the window and counting backwards. 12, she said, and a little later, 11, and then 10, and 9, then 8, then 7, almost together. So what is she doing? She is counting the leaves and figuring when the last leaf falls, she's going to die. So that's not helping her situation. So she's counting leaves. When the last leaf falls, she'll die or give up. So that's making it worse. Now, finally, the main character solves the problem in an unusual way. Well, here's the thing. The problem gets solved, the problem of the pneumonia, and it does get solved in an unusual way. The main character has help from her friends. So Sue goes and talks to Mr. Behrman. And so when we go up to, let's go back up to our characters, which we're not going to introduce Mr. Behrman at this time necessarily, but let's keep him in there so we remember him. So she's counting leaves. Sue decides, I need some help here. She goes talks to Mr. Behrman, and Mr. Behrman, who was also a painter, who had wanted to paint a masterpiece, never has painted a masterpiece. He goes out in stormy weather and paints a leaf on the wall. So that last leaf will never fall. So that the problem of her will to live and this, when the last leaf falls, then I'm going to die, that's solved. So how can we say, so we'll just keep it simple. Mr. Behrman, and here we go. She's counting. And Mr. Behrman paints one leaf on the wall. So if her criteria for letting go and dying was when the last leaf falls, that's it. Now with that last leaf on the wall, she can feel free to recover. So our final sentence, the concluding sentence, shows how the character is in a new situation as a result of how the problem was solved. So she sees that, and then she sits up and starts eating some soup. Let's see here. The ivy leaf was still there. Jonesy lay for a long time looking at it. So here we see her resolve. And then she called to Sue, who was stirring her chicken broth over the gas stove. I've been a bad girl, Sudie, said Jonesy. Something has made that last leaf stay there and show me how wicked I was. It is a sin to want to die. You may bring me a little broth now and some milk with a little port in it. And she's getting better now. So she's now in this new situation. She's recovering, and she has found her will to live. All right. And it goes back to, here's our trigger. She once again hopes to paint the Bay of Naples. So that's a good indication here. Maybe we can put this up here. Something happens. She gets pneumonia, or pneumonia is in the area. And then Jonesy gets pneumonia, and she wants to die. And she doesn't want to even paint the Bay of Naples. All right, so now let's take this and create 7 sentences and see if we can create some sort of a story arc that is essentially a summary of the last leaf. So now we are going to, let's get a new document going here. And we're going to write our 7 sentences. Now, when I do this, I like to keep myself accountable and only write 7 sentences. It's kind of tricky, but let's see if we can do it. So our first sentence, we need to introduce the characters and setting. And we need to introduce mainly Sue and Jonesy. Mr. Behrman comes in later. When we're doing this, we're just creating a rough draft of sentences. They're not going to be some fabulous artistic sentences. We just need to get something on the page to work with. And this is the writing process. So we'll say, in the quaint, let's see here. What can we say? Sue and Jonesy met over dinner one day and decided to share a space in a little district west of Washington Square. Now there's a very ugly sentence, but we introduced our characters, but we don't really know anything about them. But you know what? We're going to get the 7 sentences down, and then you can revise. Writing, magic, it happens in revision. Sentence number 2. Something happens. So pneumonia comes to their community, and this is in November. So this might be kind of important. This they moved in May. So maybe we'll give a timeline here. In May, Sue and Jonesy met over dinner and decided to share space in a little district west of Washington Square. In November, pneumonia had come to that quaint old, I'm just going to copy this, Greenwich Village. Okay, so there we have something that happened. Let's get a 3rd sentence down here. So I'm looking at the outline and just crafting a sentence. Let me just refresh my sharing. I'm going to stop sharing and reshare. Now let me reshare. And then you'll see how I am writing this. So now the thing that happened that causes the main character the big problem. So Johnsy gets pneumonia. And I can say Johnsy was stricken down with pneumonia. Now they personified pneumonia in the story, which is why they had it capitalized. I haven't personified it here, so I'm going to keep it with a small p. Jonesy was stricken with pneumonia and lost her will to live. Okay, we could say that. Sentence number 4. So she tries solving the problem, but makes it worse. She decides she wants to die and she gets sicker. So I'll just say Sue and the doctor discussed Johnsy's chances of survival, and the doctor said it depended on her will to live. Okay, so maybe we're repeating that phrase, will to live. I'm not going to worry about it while I'm drafting. The first draft is a messy first draft, and the final draft might not look anything like it. That's okay. Sentence 5, main character tries to solve the problem again. Okay, so now she finds this leaf. So Jonesy watches the leaves fall off an old ivy vine that is crawling up the other side of the building. That's too wordy. I'm not really editing here. Let's see. Watches the leaves. maybe I'll say there is an old ivy vine outside Johnsy's window, and she's counting the leaves, the remaining leaves. Let's see here. Let's see here. When the last leaf falls, she's going to give up. So in sentence 5, then I need to say outside Jonesy's window, and she's determined that when the last leaf falls, she'll die. Okay. Now, sentence 6, now we introduce Mr. Behrman and the recovery attempt, the helping. Mr. Behrman paints one leaf on the wall. So somehow we have to get him introduced here. Okay, so perhaps we go back. In May, Sue and Jonesy met over dinner and decided to share a space above Mr. Behrman's apartment in a little district. So then we have Mr. Behrman in there. We could do that. In November, pneumonia had come to that quaint old Greenwich village. Jonesy was stricken with pneumonia and lost her will to live. Sue and the doctor discussed Jonesy's chances of survival, and the doctor said it depended on her will to live. There's an old ivy vine outside Jonesy's window, and she's determined that when the last leaf falls, she'll die. So let's see what we're going to do here for our 6th sentence when Mr. Behrman paints the last leaf. Sue talks to Mr. Behrman about posing for a painting picture, and lets him know about Jonesy's situation. Somehow I have to get in there that he paints the last leaf. But still need to keep that in one sentence. You know what? I'm going to leave it. So let's go into the last sentence and then we can come back. So what you might want to do, if you're not sure and you want to put something in there, we can put something about paint the last leaf. But I'm not sure how we want to fit that in yet. That's okay. Now we're coming here, sentence 7. Once again, she found her will to live because that last leaf is still there. And she sees it as a sign that she should keep living. And she starts eating again and regaining her health. And then she finds that Mr. Behrman died and realizes the sacrifice he made for her. When Jonesy sees that the last leaf has still not fallen, she regains her will to live. Regains her will to live. Now, somehow we want to have to say something about Mr. Behrman painting. Sue talks to Mr. Behrman about posing for a picture and lets him know about Jonesy's you know what? Let's just change that up altogether. We can say, when Mr. Behrman finds out that Johnsy is ill, he goes out in the rainstorm and paints his masterpiece, the last leaf. So now I'm going to get rid of this other sentence. Sometimes you just need to come back to it, circle back to it, because you need to generate another idea, and then it will sound better. When Mr. Behrman finds out that Jonesy is ill, he goes out in the rainstorm and paints his masterpiece, the last leaf. When Johnsy sees that the last leaf is still not fallen, she regains her will to live. So now, do we need to say that Mr. Behrman dies because of it? You could, but we only have 7 sentences to work with. And if you want to rework it, you might be able to fit that in. So let's see what we have from our outline. And let me make the writing bigger so you can read along here. So here we go. And let me refresh my sharing so then you can see. All right. In May, Sue and Jonesy met over dinner and decided to share a space above Mr. Behrman's apartment in a little district west of Washington Square. In November, pneumonia had come to that quaint old Greenwich village. Jonesy was stricken with pneumonia and lost her will to live. Sue and the doctor discussed Jonesy's chances of survival, and the doctor said it depended on her will to live. There's an old ivy vine outside Jonesy's window. And you know what? We're going to have to change the tense here. There was an old ivy vine outside Jonesy's window, and she determined that when the last leaf fell, she would die. Let's see here. She was stricken, had come, was stricken. So we need to use the same tense. And as we're going, we can, so then we say, there was an old ivy vine outside Jonesy's window, and she determined that when the last leaf fell, she would die. When Mr. Behrman found out that Jonesy was ill, he went out in the rainstorm and painted his masterpiece, the last leaf. When Jonesy saw that the last leaf had not fallen, she regained her will to live. So we can see if we want it more past tense or more present tense. And there we go. That's how we're writing a 7-sentence story from a familiar story and creating a summary of that story. Thank you for joining me today. I invite you to come back next week when we will be writing a 7-sentence story about The Happy Prince by Oscar Wilde. Check out Saturday Stories tomorrow for that episode, and you can hear that story. Until next time, bye for now.